Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us from. I'm Annette Richmond. This is Content Marketing School. And I'm so excited to have my dear friend Jillian with me today. We've been on each other's shows many times. We chat offline, and it's always such a treat. It's always such a treat to spend time with you. So, for anyone who doesn't know who you are and what you do, please give us a quick rundown.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm excited to be here. My name is Jillian Whitney. I am a live stream strategist and video coach, and I help people be more visible on LinkedIn with live and recorded video. So that's me in a nutshell.
Well, that is great. And I will tell you, for people out there watching, there's always a little hiccup now that I'm streaming to Instagram. And thank you to people joining us from Instagram. Oh, I see our friend Felipe. He's joining us on Instagram. Hello, Felipe. And putting that on is just a little extra step. So I tend to be a little bit, late on the uptick. So Jillian, first of all, I have to say before we go anywhere that you have this new book out, and it's just so many tips and techniques that takes you right through thinking about going on a live to going through and being one of those sought after guests. And so, we're going to dabble a little bit into that today. For those who want more, buy the book on Amazon. So, we were chatting a little bit before we went online. And one of the things that we decided we're going to talk a little bit about, kind of pre-show things, what you should be doing, and then during the show, how to be a good guest when you're on the show. And you had mentioned the idea of expertise. So,
Mm.
and obviously, when we look for guests, we both have been doing lives for long. You longer than me, but me pretty long too. We look for people that have expertise in certain areas. So maybe it might be, how do you maybe attract people to want to invite you with your expertise?
Well, of course, content marketing. So basically, the theme of your show is content marketing. And that's the thing, is that as you are being more visible with your marketing, so whether it's video is a great one because that is going to show a LinkedIn Live host that you're camera ready and that you're comfortable being in front of the camera. So that's a good thing. Being on other people's lives, of course, if we see somebody on one live, we're like, oh, maybe they'd be good for my show. So being that visible, but even just down to writing articles, having thought leadership pieces, it's you have to have some sort of substance and you have to be known for something. So it's like, I'm not going to book somebody who's just a general person. I want somebody that has expertise on a certain thing. Maybe it could be, expertise on, my show's about LinkedIn easy peasy. So it's always been about LinkedIn, but everybody has a different angle. So I want to know, what's your angle? Because if I just kind of had the same guest week after week after week talking in generalities, nobody would get anything from that. So you have to have a unique perspective and then the expertise to back it up.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you could have a guest every week talking about, the LinkedIn banner and headline in the about section, and then some tips on, commenting, but who would want to watch that? And so it is true. And since you mentioned that, I want to mention, for people who think that they don't have anything to say, we all have something to say because we come to it from our own experience, perspective, and expertise. And so I'm glad that we're kind of starting off with that. So if you're interested, don't be afraid because you have something to say. Now, one of the things that I think is important, and I know I've had guests that I invite to come on my show, is to watch the previous shows
Mm.
ahead of time. So what's your suggestion as far as that goes.
That is key because you want to well, first of all, you want to make sure that the audience is in alignment for you because there's no point on being on a great show in front of the wrong audience. So you're just really wasting your time. So if I was here talking about investment banking or something, Annette, your audience would be like, what does this have to do with content marketing? It would be a misalignment. So knowing that the audience is a good fit, you can tell that by watching the shows because you see the comments. You can see the headlines of all the different people that are watching the show. Is that your target market? Is that a venture partner? That's really important. And I think the other thing too is you understand then the layout of the show and how it all goes and what's their style. You might want to have a very formal LinkedIn live show. You wouldn't want to be on mine. You wouldn't want to be on Annette's because Annette didn't give me 20 questions that I was supposed to study for like an exam and show up today and just, okay, question 1, question 2. Neither one of us roll like that. And you can tell that because that's how you watch those previous shows.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned the questions, and I think about that. We've talked about that. I never gave, and I don't now give my guest questions. Occasionally, if I have someone who's really nervous, I might say, "Well, here's 3 talking points that I'm going to sort of bring up." Because the worst experience I had was someone I've known for a long time who knows their stuff, reading their answers, and and
Oh,
it's so obvious. Um, but, and then I didn't have questions, and then I heard a LinkedIn Live guru, not you, someone else, actually a guy who said, "Oh, questions, you definitely get better, um, better show if you have questions." And I guess maybe if you have one of those shows. So for a guest, someone who's thinking about a guest, should they ask for questions? Should they just ask like, what is you know, um, the practice of the host to send questions or not? Or
I think that's a fair question. So it's a fair question. Is there any particular things that you're going to ask me in case I'm prepared? So I'll always tell people, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself. And I
Mhm.
might ask you for a takeaway so that they're prepared to do that because they might like, oh, I thought you were going to read my introduction. So I think having that clarity is a good idea. But I think the onus is on you as the guest to figure out, okay, this is what the topic's about today. So, what are my talking points I want to talk about? Because this is where your expertise comes in. And then, in addition to that, I would also add in that's where storytelling comes in. And you want to have some stories that maybe are case studies that you could explain, or stories that you know about from your own personal experience that back up your talking points. So, that is an easy way to prepare that makes you not have to have a script.
So, I love that you brought that up. So, can you talk a little bit more about that? How to choose stories that sort of align with your business? Because I know that, you host a live, I host a live. We both enjoy doing it. We like meeting people. And, but even when you're a guest on someone else's show, as you mentioned, you want to be on a show that is going to be the right audience for you, that they're going to want to hear your message and that's your target audience. So, how do you choose sort of the story for that target audience?
Well, sometimes what I'll do is I'll look at what are the talking points that I want to make, and do I have a story that will back up that talking point? So that's usually what I do. Sometimes you take a really good story and you say, how could I make this a talking point? So you can kind of go either way. But I think it always comes down to you need to have a repertoire of stories in the first place. And a lot of people will say, I don't have any stories. I don't know how you like show up and you have stories for a podcast or a LinkedIn Live or something like that. And it's not that you don't have to have like, oh, I climbed Everest when I was 3. Like you don't have to have these ridiculous stories. It could be a simple story. And I'll give people an exercise, a story discovery exercise. Every day, what you could do is at the end of your day say, is there anything that happened today that could be a story. So, for instance, last night I put this into practice. I thought about it and I thought, is there anything today that could be a good story? I had two things. Number one, I got this gimbal, right? And I made a video about it and I got this gimbal. And for the life of me, I could not figure out how to open up the tripod part, the legs out of it. And I felt like an idiot. And it was just like, I read the manual, I looked at the video, I could not figure out how to do it. And eventually I was just like, I don't know what to do with this. And then all of a sudden I was reading somebody's post on LinkedIn about it's okay to ask for help. And I went, that's it. I just have to ask my husband. And I just sat down with him and I said, okay, I don't get it. I don't know how to open this thing. And he was just like, okay. He looked at it and said, it's just really tight because this is how it came from the factory. It'll get looser over time. It wasn't just me. I needed to ask for help. It's a simple story. Can it be turned into something? Yes, you can talk about asking for help. And then another story I had yesterday was I showed up at a Zoom meeting 1 hour early. And you go on Zoom and you click and it's like, the host will let you in soon. And it was just like, and I'm sitting there going, why is the host not letting me in? And then all of a sudden I realized I blew it. I was 1 hour early. And then I just went, oh, I got the gift of an hour. I now have an hour to do whatever I want. It was like magic. It's like when you wake up in the middle of the night and you go, oh, is it 6 a.m.? And you go, no, it's only 1. I've got 5 more hours of sleep. That's how it felt. And it was a gift of an hour. So just being observant about every day, go to bed and say, what's the one story that I could take from my life today? Write it down.
Yeah, I love that, and I actually did the same thing the other day. I logged on early, and I know the host, so I'm texting her, and I'm going, my the link is this," and then they're like, "No, it's in an hour." I'm like, "Oh, okay, yes." It's so embarrassing, but, we all do it, and I love that because I've been trying to do that myself, and, while I feel like I'm a good storyteller, sometimes it's hard to sort of fit it in. And I will just mention quickly, I did that in my recent newsletter, which was about filters on different cameras and stuff. And I started talking about when I was at the dentist during the pandemic, and he told me that his cosmetic dentistry just went through the roof because people were seeing themselves on video, on Zoom all day long. And so they were, coming in for whitening and everything. And I'm guessing the dermatologist got, business as well. And that was a nice lead in for me for the filters. But I love that. And I think that really a practice for someone like me is to write things down. Um I started doing that, making notes on the Notion app on my phone.
There you go.
Which I think you're the first one that introduced me to Notion. So what about, as we're kind of midway through, and as you know, I always ask for final thoughts. And what about sort of during the show?
During the show, I
How to
think
be good guest?
compliment your host. Compliment your host. And one of the things I was talking to you about earlier today was I was rewatching your LinkedIn Live with Sarah Clay that you were a guest on her show the other day. And it was a good show. It was a good show. And I know you both, and it's just absolutely wonderful. And one of the things that I liked, Annette, is you were talking about, how you got to know each other, and you were talking about the days of Clubhouse. And, we all remember, well, many of us remember those days of Clubhouse because it is how so many of us met. And so Sarah revealed a secret, which, she shared during the live, which is always funny. Like, let me just tell you this, but don't tell anybody in your live. And she shared how she used to do Clubhouse sitting in her hot tub. She got a hot tub during COVID, and that's how she would do Clubhouse. And you said, I'll share my secret with you that I used to listen to Clubhouse in the shower. And that is complimenting the host. It's like the host got vulnerable and you didn't go, well, that's weird. Like you didn't make her, like she had it was a cutesy, vulnerable moment. And you followed up by complimenting it. And I think that is what a good guest does during the live is compliment your host.
Well, I love that. So I just want to say hello to a few of our friends in the audience. So I want to say, obviously, to our dear friend Jeff, learning interesting video experience. Oh, alive. Okay,
Live.
that's what his alive is. Okay, with Annette and Jillian is the best. So please excuse me as I look off to the side because that's hard for me to read this. So Mary Wu says while you are chatting, and Mary put a link to buy the book in the
Oh,
chat.
thank you,
So
Mary.
if you are interested, it is right there in the chat. And so I want to say hello to um, Marcello, who is joining us
Being live.
from Georgia. So I see
Wow.
that down there. Thank you very much. And of course, Mindy. Hi, Mindy. Hi, Mindy. Lovely to see you. And of course, our friend G. Happy
Yay.
to tune in today. And yes, target market for our audience is so key. All of this is speaking to me today. It's so true. It's so true. I think we love a lot of the things that we do, but we do have to be mindful that whatever we're doing, it's not a hobby, or at least it's not supposed to be a
Mm,
hobby.
mm.
At least for not for me. If it was, I'd be like in Europe studying something, probably Shakespeare.
Uh-oh. I don't know if Annette froze
Oh,
or I froze.
oh, nope. That I just saw my thing go whoop. Okay, I've been having some
Okay.
StreamYard problems recently, but anyway, but one of the things that I think of, and I already mentioned the idea of don't read, don't have, even if it's your topic, to have stuff like there that you're reading from. Even, maybe you have a couple of notes or something, that's fine. But when you start reading it, but one of the things too, and I know that we have talked about this, that we've both had the experience with guests, some of them the same guests, where you have guests that are talking in sound bites,
Mm,
and everything you ask them, it's almost like a politician, in a Q&A, or where whenever you ask them anything in the, you know they respond with a sound bite that is almost kind of like pushing their business or selling their business. And I'm not describing it well, but maybe you can elaborate and weigh in, share your thoughts on that.
too salesy, too salesy. So if I sat here saying, well, I could tell you that if you buy my book, and if you buy my book, and if you buy my book, if I did that all the way through the live, people would be like, shh, gone. This is an
Yeah.
infomercial. It's not a live. So it's like, I just told you an exercise on storytelling. I didn't say you have to go buy the book. It's like, if you want to buy the book, buy the book. If you don't want to, it's okay. So I think being too salesy is horrible, and nobody likes that, and it's embarrassing for the host. So never go on a live as I'm just here to sell my stuff, guys. It's like you should be coming with value and advice to share so that people walk away and say, I got something out of that today.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I like about hosting lives, and I know you do too, is we always learn from our guests. I
Mm.
always learn something. I know you pretty well, I would say, but I just learned something from you. Every time somebody comes on my show, I always learn something from them, and which I think is important. And I also, and I guess it depends on the type of show that you're on. I know, for me, I prefer a conversation. We talked about, okay, we're going to talk about like pre-show and during show, and that's kind of it. But I like a conversational show where it's people interacting with each other rather than one person, saying something and the other person responding with even like a canned, like something like they know they have their note cards. If somebody asks you
Mm.
this is what you say. If somebody asks you how to be a good guest on the show, you have a canned response of, well, you have to blah, blah. And because it's so weird. It's so weird for the host. I think it's really weird for the audience. So we are about 20 minutes in now. And so I would love it if you would share few 2 or 3 tips for people who want to be on a show that you could share with our audience, either, they're here now, replay, or listening on the podcast.
Okay, so the first would be start attending LinkedIn Lives that you'd like to be a show of and get on the host radar. And you can do that by attending the show and popping in a comment. So many of the people that have been on my lives have also been in the audience. And so that's a really key thing. We want to know that you actually enjoy the show. So if somebody came to me and, we've laughed about this, Annette, and said, don't come to me and say you want to be on my podcast and you have no idea that I do a LinkedIn Live. It's not going to work. So make sure that you're being an active participant in the live. Make sure that you're following that person. You don't necessarily have to be connected with them, but make sure you're following them. And then look at what you would have to bring to the show. Figure out what is my unique perspective and how could I say something differently? Because a lot of times you can actually be proactive and ask a host, could I be on your show? You don't have to wait to be asked. You don't have to wait to be picked. So you can literally say, I'd like to be on so-and-so's live, and then think about, here's what I would talk about. Here's my unique perspective on that. And here's what backs me up. I've been on 3 podcasts. I have a YouTube channel. So I have a couple of videos. I've never done a live before, but I'm willing to learn. That is enough. You don't have to have, 10,000 followers on LinkedIn before anybody will look at you. If you're sincere, we will look at you.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. And I just have to bring this up because this is like a Jeffism. If it's a formal show, he wears his cape. So, so yeah, it really does make a difference. So what else you got? Give us another one. And don't share everything because again, you gotta get the book.
I'm
But
good. I'm good.
I
I'll
know you
share
are. I know you are.
I'll share it all. I think the other thing too is production value. And I think that a host wants to make sure that you're going to come on and you're going to take this seriously. So you want to make sure that any of the videos you've done, they look nice. Do you have a nice background that you would have? It can be a virtual background. It doesn't have to be, don't have to be in a fancy office or anything. Do you have a decent webcam? Do you have a microphone? These are important things, especially when you're like Annette and I, and you want to repurpose to a podcast. If you don't have a lot, if you don't have good internet, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. So all of these things are important that you don't have to be like, have the most expensive equipment, but have the basics. And in the book, I talk about being Zoomable plus. You just want to have basically what you'd have for a normal Zoom call, but maybe just make sure you can have a wired connection for your internet, some of those basics things. If you don't know what that is, get tech savvy a little bit first so that you can make sure that you can do it well.
Yeah, and you do have a section on equipment, which is very helpful, and you certainly don't have to spend a lot. I know when I first started doing my podcast, I had a Blue Snowball, which is like less than $50, and then I waited, and a year I was doing it. A year later, Amazon Prime came, and I bought my Blue Yeti, which I love. But one thing that I would it just slipped my mind is I love what you said about the number of connections or followers you have. I don't look at that. I know you don't. I've had people guests on my show with like 1,500 followers on LinkedIn. I've had people guests on my show with 300,000 followers on LinkedIn. Just like tens of thousands. And, I don't think a good host, a show that you'd want to be on, I don't think you would find that to be a criteria for them.
No. I think to me, one of the most important things is, does the person have a commenting strategy? That is something that I will actually vet a guest and see, do they actually comment on other people's posts? Because if they don't, I know that they're going to come on my show and they're going to ignore my audience. And I've had a few guests do that. And that broke my heart that, my audience took the time to ask them questions, to leave wonderful comments, and they just kind of showed up like the queen. It's like, I came, I saw, I left. And I take that very seriously. Not all hosts do, but that is something that's very important to me. So having a good commenting strategy shows that you're a team player.
Yeah, and I just want to say hello to a couple of other people. And Marnie says when it's salesy, you can imagine many eyeballs glazing over, and that is absolutely for sure. And I just want to say hello to Linda Brubaker, who is joining us today, and says that she loves our tips to bring it on. So, yeah, I love that. So we are getting down sort of near the end. I mean, we could hang out here and talk like for hours, I know, but and maybe we will after the show's over. But in the meantime, I want to share my screen and pop on over to your LinkedIn profile, so people can get a look at that. Oh, and here I am. I have the wrong Jillian up. Let me just switch over
How
real
many
quick before
Jillians do you know? How many
two
Jillians do you know?
two. I know you, and I know Jillian Kelly, who's I think she's in Australia. She's a
Oh,
resume writer. I used to be on a committee with her, and
cool.
so I know her from that. So here we are on Jillian's LinkedIn profile, and so I want to ask. Obviously, are you open to connecting with people? As I
Oh,
scroll
yes.
around your profile here, you can
Yes.
see some of her guests up here, and I will tell you, please do absolutely follow Jillian because she shares a lot of great information. Um, and that is one thing that I do like to see in a guest that I'm having, that they are sharing information. And part of the reason for that is because I want to know that they have a generous spirit,
Mhm.
that they're not going to come on my show and if I say, "Can you share a couple of tips?" They really don't want to.
Hold
They don't
back.
want to. I had that happen to me early this year. It was somebody that I really didn't know, and it was a good show. It certainly was a good show, but it was. I love this. I love this background. And here's two of her books. Okay, so and it was a good show, and it was certainly interesting but when I was asking for some tips, it was kinda like, "Well, I don't know," and I was like
Mm.
I was surprised because usually someone is prepared to give maybe 3 tips on a show. I mean, that's not a lot
Yes.
to ask.
Yes. Don't
So
hold back. Don't hold back.
so we are down to our final moments here, and I'm sad, I'm sad. But anyway, so I always ask my guests for, final thoughts. So, I think it's been an interesting discussion. I've learned, I'm sure people in the audience have learned, people listening on the podcast will be learning as well. But what would you like to share that you think is important that was not brought up?
I just think that LinkedIn Lives are an amazing marketing, for content marketing. It's an amazing tool that you can, utilize. And as a guest, one of the most important things is help promote the event before, during, and after. And that's another important thing because a host will note that. I made a video yesterday. I posted it. I talked about our live. I reposted this live on my own profile. Do what you can to help promote the event so that it's not all left on the host. Again, always be a team player.
Yeah, I do love that. And once since we have a couple of minutes left, actually I'm going to keep you right to the very end here. So I will say if you are wanting to be on LinkedIn Lives as it's part of your branding whatever, can you give us just one way to find the right shows? Is there a way that we can find live shows like on LinkedIn?
Sure. So probably the biggest tip is you can actually just go to, LinkedIn/events and you'll see events that LinkedIn recommends for you. So that's one way to do it. And then, just look at the profiles. If you go to anybody's profile and say, for instance, you go to Annette's, you can look at events and you can see all the events that Annette has hosted, but also look at her experience section because she might have put some of those events and lives in her experience section as well. I also too tell people, go to my YouTube channel and look at my guest appearances. And you do the same. So go to Annette's as well. We both did the same thing where we have a playlist of every single guest appearance that we have done on other people's show. That is the best way to do homework, because you could sit there and say, oh, Lanier Johnston has a live. Oh, Sarah Clay has a live. Oh, so-and-so has a live. Brenda Meller has a live. That is the best way for you to begin to see all those different things. I wish LinkedIn had a TV guide for us. That would be awesome, but they don't. They don't. So,
Yeah.
that's the only, those are kind of the only ways to go. But just start thinking about the events that you're being invited to, and just think, would this be a good show for me? Write it down. Same with the storytelling. You must write it down, because otherwise it goes in the head and it's like flies
Oh,
away.
I know. Absolutely, for sure. See, I just learned something. I didn't know you could look up events that way. So thank you very much. So again, thank you to the many people who have been here, both on LinkedIn and also on Instagram. Hello to my friends on Instagram. Thank you so much for joining us. And everyone else, see you next week. I will have a great rest of your day. And again, Jillian, it's always such a treat. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Love you, girlfriend.
All
And
righty.
everyone else, see you next week.